Good day, class, and welcome to your second lecture of the semester on cell size and types. We will also be talking about cell organelles today. You guys have already done a lot of the research on cell organelles and hopefully presented it to each other. So this should be somewhat of a review, but I want to make sure everybody has these notes handy and available to them. As we go through it, take your notes by hand and also fill out your note taker at the end of the lesson. So when we talk about cells, they're the building blocks of all life. All living things are made out of them, and all cells come from another cell that grows into another cell and grows into another cell. So you started out as two cells coming together to form one cell. That's a sperm and an egg. And then you get a single cell. And from that one cell, you've grown into trillions of cells that make you who you are. So they're really, really tiny. Most cells can only be observed under a microscope, and some are even really, really hard to see under a microscope. You're going to be looking at these in class. Some of you have already seen them. Some will be looking at them later. But we're going to try to keep it simple in class and just talk about three main categories of cells, three basic types of cell. We're going to have animal cells. We are animals, so all animals, cells have similar characteristics. We also have plant cells that are going to be similar characteristics. These two are actually very, very similar to each other, as well as a fungus cell would be, but we're not going to look at those. And slight differences here, like this plant has a cell wall, and animal cells don't need a cell wall because our structure comes from bones. Plant structures actually come from their cell walls. And the other type is a bacteria cell right here, and these are going to be called prokaryotic cells. These are eukaryotic cells. Bacteria cells are very, very tiny. Some of them are really, really tiny, like the spirillum right here, and they are very much simpler than these cells. So you hope on a test you get what's inside a simple bacteria cell and not the organelles in here, which are much, much more complex. Okay, so the animal and plant cells are what we call prokaryotes. Or, sorry, that is so wrong. Bacteria right here are what we call prokaryotes. This cell in the background is a eukaryote. You are eukaryotic. You are very complicated. So I want you to write down the term prokaryote and know that they are the first cells and they are bacteria. So prokaryote is synonymous, the same as a bacteria. Okay, and what makes them unique is they lack a nucleus. So in this little bacteria cell right here, unlike the cell in the background picture, they do not have a nucleus, this area that holds your DNA. They also don't have these other membrane-bound organelles. Okay, pretty much they are bacteria. They are very, very simple. And their DNA just floats around inside here because they do not have the nucleus. That's what I really want you to know about them. So here's a picture inside one. Here's the DNA kind of floating around. And then it's got a cell membrane and a cell wall. But there's not all these other organelles like you see in the picture in the background. So prokaryotics are very, very simple. Don't worry about this stuff. I'm not going to test you on it anytime. They do contain ribosomes. So ribosomes, as you will learn about or have already, is where proteins are made. So these are little factories that have DNA and they make protein. So the DNA tells the ribosomes what proteins to make, and then they are able to make this beautiful bacteria and any toxin or substance that it makes. Ribosomes do not have a membrane around the outside. So prokaryotes, very simple. All they really got is DNA, ribosomes, and a cytoplasm. Okay. Our second type of cell, and we'll talk about these throughout the year, are eukaryotes. So they are much, much more complex. You can see this one in the background is very similar to this one, and they have all these membrane organelles inside of them. Just much, much more complex and able to do so many more things than a prokaryotic bacteria cell. So under eukaryotes, I just want you to write down that they have a nucleus and a membrane-bound organelles. And a membrane is like the stuff on the outside of the cell. That same stuff is around each one of these little organelles or machines inside of it. Okay, and eukaryotes are going to be something called protists. Those are like amoebas, algae, fungi or mushrooms, plants that you're used to seeing, and animals you are used to seeing. These are all complex eukaryotic cells. They are the more complex type of cells. Okay? So every eukaryotic cell has three basic structures: a nucleus, a cell membrane, that's the part on the outside of it, and cytoplasm with organelles inside of it. That is a eukaryotic cell. Okay? The two types of eukaryotic cells we've already looked at are plant and animal. So this is a plant cell. We looked at that before. Animal cell. Big difference. This guy here has a big cell wall, and it also has these green disc-looking things floating around in it. This one does not have the green disc-like floating things. That's what gives it its green color, and it's called chloroplast. Okay? This is real just basic overview of cells. Number of cells, you can be an organism that is composed of one cell, like a bacteria or amoeba, and so like a unicycle has one will. A unicellular organism has one cell. Make sure you write that down if you don't know it. And then if you have more than one cell, you have multiple cells, so we call that multicellular. Composed of many cells, and then they can organize into things like tissues. We talked about that before. And then tissues become organs, organs become organ systems, and you put it all together and you have a beautiful life like this butterfly. Yes, it even has organs inside of it. Okay. Big thing I want you to understand. Key point right now. Cells in multicellular organisms, so organisms made up of many cells like myself and Alfred back here, and Sally. Okay, can you guys see Sally back here? If you're looking up at the video of me, that's Sally. These are humans. They oftentimes specialize. So they start as one cell, but that one cell has to be able to differentiate into multiple types of cells. So if you look on my screen here, I got lungs. Lungs themselves have about 20 different cell types in them. So cells must be able to differentiate into different types of cells. The heart has different types of cells. They got cells that make up the blood vessels, the muscle, the fat. So cells have to be able to differentiate into different structures. So even though they're all animal cells, each cell can change into something different. But they all start from one very similar cell. And then depending on how their DNA gets turned on or turned off, you get different types of cells, and that's what creates a living organism. Really pretty awesome. And we call this cell specialization or differentiation. So it's underlined right here. I want you to definitely understand what differentiation is. And it's where different cells have different jobs, okay? So some cells have the job to grow hair. Mine are not working very well on the top. Some are to make blood. That happens in your bone marrow. It makes blood for your veins. Some are in your intestine, and their job is to absorb food. Some are in your brain to create memories or to fill things. Some are white blood cells, and their job is to attack a foreign agent, a pathogen that comes into your body. So cells have different jobs. That is what cell differentiation is cells do different things. But they all still start from one cell because cells come from pre-existent cells. Just some more examples of specialized cells in animals. Here is the look at a muscle cell. Okay, under a microscope. Hopefully we're looking at these in the next couple of weeks. These, you can see the little lines. They're meant to contract like a muscle does. Red blood cells are very unique, and they don't have anything in them. They have one job, and it's to carry oxygen. Because they don't have any organelles or anything, they only live for about, say a month, and then they die and you have to make new ones. And then on the opposite end, some of these neurons last your entire life. Once they're formed in childhood, they last the entire life, but they help us think and are probably the least understood of any cells in our body. Plants have to specialize too. They're not just as simple as we think. They have different cells. They have things called guard cells right here. These things can open and close to allow water and gas in, like CO2. This here is xylem. That's what transports water. It can take water from the roots of a California redwood 300 feet high. So they're like awesome straws. And then here's a pollen under microscope. very specialized cells for reproduction in plants. They carry the sperm. That is going to be all for today. We will do organelles next. I know I said that at the beginning, but we'll make that into another video. Talk to you.